Hello, viewers. In these last programs, Dr. Keppe has been pointing out that the dangerous aspect that exists related to the dominance of the financial power mainly relates to the economic, political, and legislative systems of the nations. We notice an intense decline in happiness and a sharp increase in the use of drugs related to psychic problems, of depression, and in the last 50 years the percentage of suicides in the nations have increased by 60%, and mainly in countries that are technologically and financially developed. Now, we are noticing that this fall is happening not only in the great banks and corporations such as General Motors that ended in Chapter 11, but we notice that the technocrats, the financiers, the economists are not the people that are best indicated to lead the nation. On the contrary, there are sociologists who state that the era of the future will be the era in which the great corporations will lead humanity. And this is already happening, and we can already see the disaster this is if it continues. I would like to remind you that in 1984, Dr. Keppe published a book called The Decay of the American People and of the United States, in which he stressed the danger of something like this happening, not only in the United States, but in all nations that are somehow linked to the American economy. As the dollar is the currency used in the exchange system of all the nations, we notice that all countries will be and are affected by this disorganization that was officially instituted through Reaganomics in the 80s. Mainly, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Keppe, what has happened now with catastrophic results. You are proposing an economy that is totally different from this one, such as the one you write about in Work and Capital, which is a very important book to read and very current, even though it was written in the days of Reagan, when everyone was hopeful and commemorating the success of the stock exchange. It was already a very current book, in which you mention that the only value, the only wealth that a country, evidently the people, have is wealth based on work, in production, trilogical productivism of quality and necessity. Today we see people talking about productivism, Dr. Keppe. It's just as well that they are at least beginning to talk about the subject.
There is a woman in England who is using this term productivism, seeing now the need of doing productive work. She calls it productivist capitalism. We've been constantly showing this concept of productivism since 1984. So, as she incentivates capitalism there in England, her name is now in all the media in the world, even with the possibility of winning a Nobel Prize. And as she is from South America, as we are, apparently she was born in one of our South American countries, with all certainty she has been reading our work for quite some time now. But as Claudio was talking about, ever since Adam Smith, more value is given to economic life than the political sector or than any other type of activity. So when there occurred the crash of the stock market in 1929 in the United States, there arose an Englishman who began to talk about the need for an economy to put money aside, to save it. That is, to not use it so much. So let's see who it was.
John Maynard Keynes.
Keynesianism, we can call it, is responsible for this period of enormous money speculation. Because what happens is that money is placed as being more important than work, above any type of activity. So the stock markets began to generate enormous profits in dividends and a capacity for incredible speculation, and therefore making those who are called yuppies absolutely rich. The yuppies were those who invested in the stock market and would, for example, badmouth a company until its shares would fall. They would then buy up shares in these companies and begin saying positive things about the company in the media. And then, when the shares would go up, they'd sell the shares they had bought for unbelievable profits. And as we know, this group of people became incredibly rich. Now consider well, I'd like to show you 3 types of actions of the human being. Let's see what they are.
First, criminal acts. For example, robbing, drug dealing, lying, being tight-fisted, being deceitful, and bad-mouthing people.
These are low-level criminal acts committed by those who are more delinquent, who are more linked to the ways of extracting from others. Now there's also another type of action that we notice countries commit. Let's see what it is.
A deceitful action, for example, to charge interest rates. This is a demagogy. Charge high taxes and pay low salaries.
So, do you see, I have set up a sequence. The first one, actions that are more serious, like drug trafficking, robberies, these very criminal things. Then, actions that are deceitful actions to trick others, which are medium level, but also criminal. And thirdly,
good action, which would be to do justice, to be merciful, to promote economic help and improvement, give love to one's fellow man. Only this last type of action generates well-being, health, and real wealth.
Notice that every country has these 3 types of actions, of which only the third action is good. This is the real action of living the truth. To be merciful is truth. The issue of obtaining a good economic situation for everyone is truth. It's love for one's fellow man. Without this type of action, every country goes into a decline. And this is the great defect that wild capitalism got itself into, because the human being, due to his corrupted nature, tends to actually be a capitalist being. But then there should at least be a control regarding how much a person earns, controlling especially those who are shrewder, more conniving. Now, talking about the issue of stock market, let's consider this sentence.
There wasn't a crash in the stock exchange, but consciousness of the non-existence of money, of this bubble, of this virtual bubble.
So these millions and billions of dollars of money that the stock market talks about, of course, this doesn't exist. It only existed in the imagination of these stock exchanges, of these pathological people who think about millions and millions and millions in a delirium of greatness. This is an illness. For example, in reality, ask a person to count out $1 million. He can spend his whole life counting and he'll never finish. That is, how could it be that he has 70 billion, 50 billion, 2-3 billion? And why so much money? This money should be used for the nation, for the commonwealth of the nation, of its people. Not for the enrichment of just one person, one family. So it's good that these billionaires see this, because they are not creatures who deserve this. They are people who are very seriously sick. So let's now look at what would be the function of society, of true society.
First, a developed people respects socially just laws.
Of course, if the social laws are unjust, as they are today, and as was in the days of Louis XVI in France, in the days when if the nobles needed more money, that all they had to do was raise the taxes. Just look at how nowadays they do the same thing. If the country is lacking in money, they just increase taxes. And let's see now what I've written. Secondly,
the three basic social principles are goodness, aesthetics, and justice.
Notice that economy is not included here, because if there exists goodness and aesthetics, which many people do not give any value to, artists need to be helped, mainly the good artists. And the third one, justice, that by having these three elements, there will exist then a correct economy. Therefore, there would be a control over the economic wealth of the country. And now, thirdly, let's see.
A society is above human powers because it is divine. Its origin is divine. Right, Dr. Keppe?
Exactly.
The human being needs to become conscious that he has to serve society, which is just.
This is something few people know about. Not even Durkheim nor Weber, who were economists, who studied social life. But I never heard anyone say anything like this that I'm trying to show, that society is perfect at its base. But it is perfect because it was created by the perfect being, who is the divine being. So if an individual attacks this society, he is attacking the goodness that he has. Because no matter how bad a society can get, like that of Germany during Nazism, no matter how bad a society is, it still has at its base a good structure which holds things together. Or take a society that is violently capitalistic, such as the American society. Anyway, it still has many things that are divine in its society. And it's this divine part that sustains its people at a certain level.
That is, Hitler, for example, and the little groups that surrounded him, attacked and destroyed everything that they had that was beautiful, good, and real in Germany. So much of that population became desperate about losing the culture, the art, the means of production they had.
And the same thing is happening now in the United States. They wage war all over the place. So what are they doing that is different from Nazi Germany? It's a new form of dictatorship mentality that destroys their own nation. We'll be right back.
The most original contemporaneous writer in the world today, says the National Scientific Research Center in France. A genuine contributor to the intellectual treasury of civilization, says former U.S. Ambassador Joseph Kogassian. For these times of uncertainty and conflict comes a work of extraordinary vision, hope, and moral clarity. Brazilian psychoanalyst and social scientist Norberto Keppe writes with wisdom and authority about the things that really matter. How to heal illness, how inverted science is leading the destruction of nature, and what to do about it. Finding spirituality within, structuring a truly just society. There are more than 3,000 books published worldwide every day. None are more important than these. The books of Norberto Keppe, Trilogical Science, leading us to a new world.
I would like to show you an author, a sociologist, who was very much considered, whose studies are well respected. In fact, there are two sociologists who are the most important. Look at who the first one is.
Émile Durkheim.
So let's take a look at what he did.
The inversions of Émile Durkheim. First, the wrong idea that the social factor supplies or results in the origin of society.
So this idea of his left France rather confused. For example, if it's common nowadays for many people to commit suicide, then this is considered normal. If there are a lot of people committing suicide or killing other people, then this is a social factor. It has to be incorporated into society. Instead of being seen as a distortion of society, a person who kills himself is a person who is outside the true and good social environment. Therefore, it is not a social factor that determines the correct social structure. If any given social factor is bad, it shows a distortion, a denial or omission of what is good. And secondly, let's see.
Everything that happens has its origin in society, even suicide.
This is his idea, which is a wrong idea. Instead of the fact that the person who commits suicide or commits homicide or the individual who takes drugs are problematic due to themselves alone. Let's see, thirdly.
This is the reason why the French society is always so confused. It is necessary to conscientize that the social factor can be prejudicial if it is wrong, if it is ugly, and if it is a lie. So, Dr. Keppe, I would like to make a comment that I think is worthwhile. That many viewers must be very confused with your argumentation that you use to speak of society. So when you speak of society, it's the same thing when you talk about reality. Reality is good, beautiful, and truthful. But there exists a distortion of the pseudo-society. So you speak of society. Society alone, in its origin, was good, beautiful, and truthful. And all these bad things happen in society. Drug dealers, materialism, Reaganomics, whatever it may be. These things are illnesses that arose. So, to look after these sane societies is like looking after an organism that gets sick. So it is necessary to return to its original sanity. So it is very important to make the distinction between a real society and a pseudo-society. Because evidently this situation we are in, since we live with so many groups looking after the real society, this generates a sense of depression, a very strong social unsatisfaction.
No, I'm going to say something that is very important. Consider well. The issue of officializing the use of drugs, marijuana, or whatever drug it may be. Why don't the governments allow people who want to use drugs to use them? It's very important to solve this issue of drugs by liberating the situation so as to avoid so many assassinations and wars. Because we know that drugs in general are controlled by the groups who have interest in earning exorbitant sums of money through what is prohibited. Because that's where he can extract all the profit for himself and not for the country. It's similar to cigarettes, for example. If the individual wants to smoke, what can one do? If he wants to drink alcohol till he drops dead, what can one do? He can smoke or drink till he drops dead. People have the right to choose life or death. So this legalization of drugs, legalization, that is to say, it's like one's sexual life, for example. It's like other pathological factors. A person has to have consciousness of what is ruinous for him.
I would like to say the following, that this situation of legalizing the sale and consumption of drugs generates such an abnormal situation, for it increases and intensifies the selling of drugs that children are subject to. They're subject to become stimulated by this consumption of drugs. If this is officially adopted, we could probably go towards even greater conscientization, where parents would have greater control and educators be able to conscientize children and the youth about the downside of drug addiction. things that are right now, as it is being conserved in secret or prohibited. It is completely out of the population's control.
Now I'm going to introduce to you the ideas of Max Weber. He was a German who studied society. So let's see just what his ideas were.
Max Weber noticed that society based itself first on affectionate action, and second, in rational action, and third, in the economy.
Notice that his analysis was better than Emile Durkheim. So we see that the real society is based on work, but in work that is just, that is serious, and based in reason, the truth. And then, the third element, instead of placing it as being the economic, as he did, I would place the artistic, because without the arts, try to imagine a society without art. And here in Brazil, art has always been combated, as in the entire world probably. In Paris, we have the Paris Opera House, which is something absolutely marvelous. Now they have built a horrible new theater, which is way too bright and just isn't conducive to opera as it should be. The situation is such that artists earn very little money. Sometimes they even go hungry and have tremendous economic difficulties. But without art, no country is able to move forward, because every civilization comes from the arts. Not only the Renaissance, which came from the arts in Italy, as in Greece, philosophy and theology as well, they came from the arts. Why were churches made in such a beautiful manner and became famous? Because art is a lot closer to God than money, of course. Money distances from God. So it's art that brings the human being closer to divinity. Now let's see what else I've written. Secondly,
Thus, the factor that nations that are more materialistic have more riches.
Wealth in terms of material wealth. Perhaps the idea that Max Weber had was that it's money that generates wealth. But it's not money. It's mainly art, then goodness and the truth. And thirdly, let's see.
Max Weber gave more value to work than to leisure.
Just look, in this point he was very important. So when we leave France and enter into Germany, one notices an enormous difference in terms of aesthetics. How the German people form a country that is more beautiful than others. They take care of all the details. And let's see the observation. Germany developed more than France because it perceives the internal aspect of society. Now, what is needed for a person to know himself well? Take a look at some data I've got for you.
Do you want to know yourself well? First take a look at what the parents are like. The woman, the mother.
A woman has to just look at her mother, and the man his father. That is, a woman will become very similar to her mother. So she looks at an older woman, sometimes not very elegant, let's say, but with time she's going to be like that. And the father also. The man has to see what his father was like in order to know what he will be like one day. And secondly, let's see.
Do you remember how your teachers were at school?
Teachers have a tremendous influence. And thirdly,
check out how your friends are and the people you admire. Observation. The genetic conduct adapts itself to the family and social ambient.
Even one's genetics change in accordance to the social ambient. They say that you are who you consort with. So what is a good individual? One who has the habit of being good. What is a bad individual? One who has the habit of being bad. What is a sick individual? One who has the habit of being sick. It's in habits. Now, if the habit is in agreement with goodness, then he is sane. Let's see this sentence.
Virtue is the human being's essence.
So, where there is no virtue, which is the manifestation of goodness, of the truth, of what is beautiful, one can never forget the artistic part of humanity, because everything that is beautiful manifests the truth and manifests goodness. It's difficult to find, for example, an artist who is delinquent, who is a criminal. It's very rare. Now, I would like to remind our viewers of the following: that humanity does not follow in its social life, its economic life, artistic life. Well, the artistic follows more, but in general, social life does not follow this author here, who is the only one who spoke the complete truth. Take a look at who he and his mother are. Who are they? Our Lady, the Mother of Christ, who was perfect, pure goodness, beauty, and the truth. And who else?
Jesus Christ.
It's quite observable that in terms of Christianity, till today, Christianity has not developed in society, only in some churches.
We'll be back next time. Until then.